Ladies and gentlemen, Violent Games here. Today I'm going to be discussing whether or not I think Fallout 4 is a good game now versus when it originally launched. I'm going to be reviewing this based on the console perspective, as always. So that's the kind of perspective you're going to be getting, but a lot of the points I'm going to be making I do feel run kind of a cross-platform type of vibe. So, you know, it won't ultimately offend you, but when I talk about frame rate and stuff, then that's definitely a console-specific thing. So, first things first, how did I feel about Fallout 4 when the game launched? I bought it on midnight, on the midnight release, like a fucking loser, and I sat there and I did a trivia at GameStop answering various Fallout New Vegas questions, which was fun as shit, because I had, like, recently played the game, and I was, like, owning, and I got, like, a bunch of bracelets and shit. It was funny. I got, like, a patch, I remember, because they were asking about, like, the Caesar's Legion or something, and no one knew about Caesar's Legion, but I actually played that faction. So, that was fun. But I went home and I played the game and I thought it was a colossal piece of shit. I thought the story was fucking terrible, the characters were fucking terrible, the game barely functioned on console at launch, there was game-breaking bugs, script-breaking bugs. The first playthrough I actually did for Fallout 4 broke. My character was stuck in place and couldn't move. That's how bad some of these fucking glitches were. And I know there was like some abstract way to fix them in certain instances, but I didn't know that at the time. So I immediately hated the game, and within a week of playing it, returned it. Years later, the Nuka World comes out, and they finally added in evil choices, which I always like playing evil characters in RPGs. Don't ask me why. I might be a psycho, but, you know, that's just my preference. So they added Nuka World in, and I heard you got to have your own raider gangs, and I was like, fuck yeah. So I got the game, and now I am reporting to you how I feel about it overall. Is it a better game? You know, that sort of thing. So let's answer the question I just brought up. Is Fallout 4 a better game now than when it was on launch, including all of the DLCs and shit? The answer, overwhelmingly so, is yes. The game's not perfect. I'm going to get into that as well. But this game, the value proposition for this game has gone way up. So, without further ado, I'd like to get into all of the good points, followed by all of the bad points, and then kind of give you a little score, probably based on a 1 to 10, just because I feel like that's more specific than a 1 to 5 scale. You have a little more wiggle room to kind of like throw in numbers. I'm not going to do that 0.5 nonsense. That shit is stupid. So, let's talk about the positives real quick. First positive, and the reason that I think the game went from a bad subpar game to a very interesting, at least mechanically wise, very interesting experience, is survival mode. Survival mode was added a little bit later into the game's life cycle, I believe a couple months after the game initially came out. And what it adds a few mechanics, like for example, you can't save manually, you have to save only in a bed, that's the only way it will happen. There are no auto saves. I think there's an exit save just in case, but for the most part, you can't really save at all. You can't fast travel, which changes the way you interact with the world massively. And I think, to be honest, that's the way the game was meant to be experienced. Because fast traveling never lets you re-explore an area and be like, oh, I missed this, or oh, I get to see it from this perspective. When they removed fast traveling, it slowed down the pace enough to where you really got to explore some of the areas and really find cool secrets and shit like that, which I adore. Sorry, still recovering from a cold. Not only that, but survival mode also increased the damage you took so that each firefight was very intense. Granted, it kind of forces you to play stealth a little bit early on, even though you might not want to do that. Unless you build like super tanky, then maybe you can get away with not playing super stealthy, but for the most part, you're kind of forced into like a super stealth situation, which is fine by me because I enjoy stealth. So that was a huge positive. I think survival mode made the game so much more engaging. And not only that, but it made food items useful again. Now, I understand that food items were kind of an overpowered healing item in the main game, but now they serve the purpose of also feeding your character, so you would be actively hunting and stuff throughout the game as well. It just added so much depth to the overall Fallout experience. I thought it was pretty fucking cool. So, let's move on to point number 2. The DLC that was added, at least the story-based DLCs, were much more interesting than the base story of the game. This is a huge positive because the content that I've been playing, and I haven't even been to Far Harbor yet. I'll be completely honest, I played Nuka World, I love Nuka World, but I've experienced let's say less than 5% of Far Harbor. Far Harbor has better voice actors, more interesting plot, a darker tone to it, and it's just way, way cooler than the vanilla game. So the DLC's adding that extra value to the game is very, very positive in my opinion, or is a very, very positive thing. So yes, better voice acting, the works, more interesting shit happening, more content, more interesting weapons, everything that was added from the DLCs is pretty cool. Now let's move on to point number 3. Major bugs and frame rate issues have been fixed on the console versions. Granted, the frame rate was 30. That's what it should be. When the game originally launched, the game barely ran at 30, ever. And the loading screens were absolutely unfucking bearable. Which is actually, I'm going to feed into another point that I'm talking about earlier, actually. I'm sorry. We're not going to talk about that right now. But there were, like I said, major game-breaking bugs in Fallout 4. A lot of these have been patched to the point where there's not nearly as many issues. Loading screens are actually kind of cut down a bit as well, making the game less unbearable to play on the console version. I don't have proof for that, to be honest, but it's just a feeling. I remember when I first played the game, I was like, these loading screens are unbearably long. And I guess on PC, again, your perspective is going to be different than ours. But on console, the loading screens for Fallout 4 were fucking ridiculous. And now they're, somewhat reasonable. They're still long. There's still some long loading screens, especially when you boot up the game. But it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. So that's a huge, huge plus. A lot of the bugs are fixed, from minor bugs to major game-crippling bugs. And certain exploits are gone now, too, like the special book farming shit. Now, time for the final positive. With all of these things being said, the game has a massively large amount of content. A massive amount of content. With Nuka World and Far Harbor being added, the game's content has been exponentially blown up. However, you're going to get much more bang for your buck if you do choose to play on survival mode, because like I said, it changes the pacing of the game to a crawl, but it's a much more interesting crawl than it is on the other difficulties. So I do recommend, especially if you like harder, more difficult RPGs that you play on survival. It's that great of an experience, but again, final point being that the game has a massive amount of content now. And it's not all filler and a lot of killer. So, yeah. Now let's move on to the negatives. Because there are some bad things that still occur. One being an obvious one. There are still frame rate dips in this game, especially around the Mass Fusion Good Neighbor area. For some reason, on both my friend's PC and my console, the game runs like shit here. I don't know what Bethesda did. I don't know if it's because they group too much enemies too close to one another, but there are significant frame rate issues in that area. And there are some other frame rate issues, for example, in Nuka World, that are still prevalent in the game. So you will experience frame rate dips pretty often. They're not game-breaking. Once the stutter is over, it's usually gone for a long period of time, so it's not anything too bad. I know we've had to deal with it in the past with other Fallout games, so if you played Fallout on console before, you're kind of used to this, but it is a negative, and I wanted to bring it up. Second issue, pop-up and loading. Like I said, the loading screens are ultimately better, but they're still significantly long, and the pop-up is almost unacceptable in certain locations in the game. For example, in Nuka World, if you get off the train, I'm on survival, so I can't fast travel in Nuka World. I get off the train on Nuka World, and I run up to the part where Shank's supposed to be. The entire market and all of the NPCs are gone, because they're still popping in by the time I've reached my objective. I'm sitting there waiting for this guy to spawn into the game so that I continue the quest, and it's extremely immersion breaking when you're sitting there waiting for the game to load, when you're physically standing there with your character and there's nothing there and you're just letting everything slowly pop in. It's very awkward. Third problem. Nuka World leveling on survival mode is fucking ridiculous. When you go to Nuka World, you get a massive amount of experience for each kill, and I went there with my idiot savant character, and she leveled up, I'm not shitting you, within like the course of 10 to 20 minutes, like 15 fucking times. And what ended up happening is, and this is going to feed into another point, is that it made me completely overpowered and it gave me massive balancing issues. I couldn't, if I was wearing any armor, it didn't matter what fucking armor it was, I was the Terminator. Because I had massive, like, good armor perks and, like, my armor skill was up or whatever, I couldn't fucking die. And it took the immersive, very tense combat from Fallout 4 and made it extremely easy to play. And not only that, but at the end of the Nuka World DLC, you can get a perk that increases your damage resistance by an additional 25%. I literally could not take damage. I got hit with a fat man and lived. That's how high my armor resistance was. And I was like, this is fucking ridiculous. Like, it should not, like, they should have thought about that before they incorporated that experience boost. Yes, it's nice to have an experience boost, but on survival, with the experience being amped up so high, it makes you overpowered and it takes away the whole point of survival mode, which is to survive and have a tense experience. So the Nuka World leveling is fucking ridiculous, and they need to fix it. Whew. Now, point number 4, and this has been an issue from the very start of the game, and it is still prevalent now. The main protagonist, both male and female, are uninteresting, boring, like the most boring fucking characters I've ever played, and I've played games with silent protagonists that are more interesting than them. What the fuck were they thinking when they put in these voiced characters and removing the evil decisions from the vanilla game? I will never understand. But I remember when everyone saw the E3 presentation of Fallout 4 and they were like, oh yeah, there's a voiced protagonist. I'm like, no! And they're like, Tyler, why are you pissed off? I'm like, because they're you know what this means? They're going to dumb down the dialogue system. And they're like, no, they're not, Tyler. They're going to have just all the same shit, all the good stuff that we expected from New Vegas and Fallout 3. I'm like, you watch. And they're like, okay. So they get the game. And they're like, wow, there's a Mass Effect wheel? What the fuck? And the reason that there's a Mass Effect wheel is because they couldn't pay voice actors to do, like, several interesting dialogue options that ultimately mattered. And it really stripped down the interesting dialogue from the previous games. And I don't know what the fuck they were thinking when they put this in. Did they not fucking think about the repercussions behind that? Did they not think about the repercussions to removing evil karma in the game when it's been there from start to finish and no one has complained about it? In fact, they say it's one of the most interesting parts of Fallout is that you can play a good or evil character. Who'd have fucking thought? Like, the protagonist is just so fucking dull. And yes, Nuka World does improve on, again, evil dialogue, but then again, what if you don't want to play an evil character? Then you're just playing this generic fuckwit who's just looking for their child and moping. It's like, how can you relate to, like, a single parent who's looking for their child if you're not a parent, if you're not in that age range, which most people who play this game probably aren't, I gotta be honest. Like, how are you supposed to relate to a character that is like, oh, where's my baby? Oh, like, I don't give a fuck about my wife in the game. When she died, I thought it was funny. I was like, oh, they killed her immediately. Thank you. That was boring. And I took the ring and I fucking sold it immediately. Like, oh, man. And the voice acting with these protagonists is terrible. It's fucking god-awful, and I don't even think it's their fault. I think they were just given terrible lines by Bethesda. Like, why in Elder Scrolls Online is the dialogue so much better than in Fallout 4? I don't fucking understand it. Why did ZeniMax get better voice actors than Bethesda? Doesn't Bethesda have the budget of Jesus fucking Christ God? Like, they need to have better voice actors or more interesting characters. You can't roleplay a character that has a voice that doesn't fit your roleplaying. It just doesn't work. Because, like, in New Vegas, you could say zany shit, or you could say very calm and calculated shit, and there was even interesting dialogues that actually had an impact. The dialogue in this game still has no fucking impact on where the conversation leads. I loaded a save. I can't remember who I was talking to be honest. But I loaded a save at one point, and this was before now. This was, like, when I had Fallout on vanilla. And I had a conversation with, I think it was Nick Valentine, actually. And I tried every dialogue option, and the end result was the same. They just were like, oh, you're being rude. And then they went back to the same generic dialogue that they went to. Like, there was, like, a sentence worth of reaction to, like, what I had said. It's like, no. Ugh, shit is so bad. I don't fucking... Like, they need to hire some good goddamn writers and stop fucking around with the game. Like... There's so many companies that could have done it better. I'm just saying. That's probably the worst part of the game for me, and the biggest attraction is that the dialogue's absolute fucking garbage, and I skip through it most of the time. Like I don't know if I'm gonna put this in the video or not, but there was a moment where I was just talking to this one guy named Cito, and I was just like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna kill him because I'm done talking with these fucks." Oh, it's so bad. Gives me a migraine just thinking about it. Now, alright, let's get on to the final issue, and then I'm going to move on to the score. The final issue, and this kind of feeds into the fourth point that I mentioned, or not the fourth point, the third point, is that there are balancing issues in the game, and I'm mostly referring to That's playstyle. That's playstyle in Fallout 4 is way too fucking overpowered. And it's the only way to play a melee sneak character who I wanted to play when I started the game. So I booted it up and I'm like, okay, I need Blitz because that's going to increase my melee distance so that I can actually close the gap on my targets. I get Blitz and I play through the entire game with Blitz. Once you get Blitz 2, you are completely fucking overpowered and nothing can kill you. There are multipliers on multipliers on multipliers on multipliers on fucking more multipliers on top of a pile of dead fucking multipliers multiplied by the multipliers following up with a multiplier. Why the fuck are there so many damage modifiers, defense modifiers in the game? There's Preston Garver's United We Stand, Paladin Dance's Know Your Enemy. There's Deacon's Cloak and Dagger. Like, modifiers on modifiers on modifiers, and it makes you overpowered as fuck. There's even a magazine that had a modifier for my knife that was already doing, like, a fucking mini-nuke damage with criticals. Why is this necessary? Why are you giving me the tools of God to kill, like, enemies with one hit? Like, it's so anticlimactic when you're having a slow crawl through the beginning of the game, and then all of a sudden you're the fucking Terminator. Why? Why? The game was so good up until, like I said, I over-leveled at Nuka World. And I guess next time I play, I'm going to have to, like, strategically try not to level at Nuka World. Like, I don't know what I'm going to have to do. But I don't know. I'm going to play through again and see if I get the same result. But the balancing issues are fucking ridiculous. I highly advise, like, if you're going to play on survival mode, don't put a lot of points into the endurance stat. This is my advice for you. Because once you get to the higher levels, you get a higher health multiplier, and that is based on how much endurance you have. If you have 10 endurance or above that, using things like solar powered or whatever to give it an extra boost, you're not going to die. When you're level 60 and you have 10 endurance, you have so much fucking health that you can, like, wear nothing into battle and still survive. Because of things like, again, like perks like United We Stand and from Preston Garvey, and things like fucking the Pack Alpha perk, which I don't know why the fuck that's a perk that you can get in the game because it's so goddamn overpowered. And by the way, there's another melee modifier on that. Like, melee builds are so fucking overpowered, it's retarded. Ugh. Alright, there's the rant, guys, but now I'm going to move on to my final verdict. I literally needed to take a break there for a second. Overall, like, I'm going to give it a score. Overall, I think Fallout 4 is a 7 out of 10. Now, I want you to understand that my scores are not inflated. That means a review that is a 6 out of 10 is still a positive review. I know IGN and other companies have it overinflated their score, like Game Informer as well, to where a 6 is technically a bad thing. I think this is fucking stupid, and that a 5 should be average, and anywhere below that is worse than average. And then everywhere above 5 is a positive. So for me, the game is a 7 out of 10 with a massive amount of replay value because of the things I just stated. But again, if you're going to play on survival mode, just watch your endurance because it's kind of fucking overpowered as shit. And if you want to have a fun, balanced experience late game, you have to like literally preemptively decide what your health stat's going to be or how much you're going to have into endurance, if any at all. I usually start my characters with 1 endurance because it's just too easy to have high endurance in my opinion. So guys, that's going to be it for me. I think the game's a 7 out of 10. Talking about value proposition real quick, if you're going to buy this game based on my review, I recommend you buy it at a local game store because the price that is currently online right now for this game, digitally, is way too fucking high. $60 for the base game of Fallout 4 is not worth it. The game's been out long enough, fucking Bethesda. Lower your goddamn price. Stop being fucking immature. You're not the gift of fucking God. Lower your goddamn price. Mirror's Edge lowered its price. Like, I don't see what your goddamn problem is. Maybe it's just because people consume the game massively. I don't know what it is. Or maybe they jacked up the price because they knew that people were going to buy because of Nuka World. But if you buy it used at a game store, that's the best way to get the vanilla game. Then buy the season pass separately. Around then, you're going to get around to $60 to $75, depending on where you go. But ultimately, that's the best proposition for you as a consumer. I recommend getting it that way. Fuck Bethesda, buy it used so that they don't get their fucking greed money. That's essentially why I want you to do it. It's like an ethics reason. So, 7 out of 10. Thank you for watching if you did. If you want to see me do more Fallout content, by all means, I'm open for that. Like I said, I'm already going to be doing a playthrough on the side by myself, but if you guys want to be a part of that, I could probably edit it into a video where I just kind of like poke fun at certain mechanics or whatever and go from there. I am still working on Overwatch shit, so if you were about to type that into the comments section, I'm working on it. It's still a thing. I just haven't been playing online with other subscribers and stuff. So I'm not dead or anything. It's just that I wanted to work on some guides by myself. So I've rambled enough. Peace out, guys. Have a wonderful time with life and shit.